All right, today we are diving deep into one of the most thrilling and honestly, one of the most controversial topics in all of wildlife tourism, shark cage diving. It's an industry that literally puts you face to face with one of the ocean's top predators, but it's also sparking a huge debate about whether we should be doing it at all. So let's just start with a really simple question. Look at this picture. Would you get in that cage? It seems like a yes or no question, but the answer is, well, it's complicated. And your answer gets right to the heart of what we're talking about today, that balancing act between thrill, conservation, and consequence. Okay, so first things first, what exactly is shark cage diving? On the surface, it's pretty straightforward. You're lowered into the water inside a big steel cage to see sharks up close and personal. But there's one tiny detail that is the source of pretty much all the controversy, and it's that last part, the use of bait. And that really brings us to the core conflict, doesn't it? On one hand, you have the undeniable allure, the absolute thrill of being that close to a powerful predator. But on the other hand, you've got a growing number of people asking some really tough ethical questions about our impact on these incredible animals. And let's be clear, this isn't some small niche activity we're talking about. This is a massive multi-million-dollar global industry. From South Africa to Australia, all the way to the US, it's big business. And that's exactly why this whole debate matters so much. So, let's start with one side of the argument, the case for shark diving being a powerful force for good. The people who support it say these experiences aren't just for adrenaline junkies. They argue they could be vital for the future of sharks themselves. The pro-diving argument really breaks down into a few key points. First, it educates people about how important sharks are. Second, the money from tourism can help fund actual conservation work. And third, and this is a big one, it helps change the image of sharks from, mindless movie monsters into the magnificent animals they actually are. This quote really nails the core belief on the pro-diving side. It's that classic idea, you protect what you love and you only love what you understand. The argument is that this kind of direct, jaw-dropping experience is the absolute best way to create a whole new generation of shark advocates. But there is, of course, another side to this story. We've got to talk about the hidden costs of that thrill. Critics, and that includes a lot of scientists, are raising some major red flags about the unseen impact on the very animals this industry says it's celebrating. And when you dig into all the criticism, it really just boils down to one single practice, chumming. That's the mix of fish parts, blood, and oils that they throw in the water to lure the sharks in. It definitely works, but it is at the absolute heart of this whole ethical problem. And this is the chain reaction that has critics so worried. It starts with the bait, right? Over time, the sharks can learn to associate boats and people with a free lunch. This can mess with their natural hunting patterns, and in a worst-case scenario, it could make them dependent on handouts or even more aggressive than they'd normally be. So to kind of sum up the anti-diving argument, critics say chumming changes shark behavior, it might increase the danger for swimmers or surfers nearby, it disrupts the whole ecosystem, and it can even pose safety risks, not just for the divers, but for the sharks themselves, who sometimes get injured on the cages. So you've got these two very strong, very opposite points of view. The conversation then naturally shifts to, well, what do we do? If this industry isn't going anywhere, how can we find some kind of balance? And that's where regulation and responsibility really come into play. This right here, this is the entire debate in a nutshell. One side says it changes how we see them. The other side worries it changes how they see us. The million-dollar question is, can you have one without the other? And yeah, finding that balance is incredibly tough, mostly because there's no single global rulebook for this stuff. The regulations can be completely different depending on where in the world you decide to dip your toes in the water. I mean, just look at how all over the place the rules are. In the US, it can change from state to state. Famous hotspots like South Africa and Australia have their own strict rules for certain areas. But globally, there's just no consistency on how many divers can be there, how close they can get, or even how they use chum. So with all this conflicting info and this messy patchwork of rules, the focus really comes back to you, the tourist, the adventurer, the person who's actually making the booking. You, believe it or not, have a pretty direct role in shaping where this industry goes next. Which leads us to the most practical question of all, right? If you do decide to go, how can you do it the right way? How do you make the most responsible choice so your experience is as ethical as it can possibly be?
Think of this as your homework. It's a checklist of questions you should be asking any operator before you even think about giving them your money. What's their safety record? Do they give back to conservation? What exactly is their policy on chumming? Are the guides actual experts? And what are they doing to protect the environment? A good, reputable operator will have solid answers for all of these.
But it's also really important to remember that cage diving isn't the only game in town. If all these ethical questions are just a bit too much for you, there are other amazing and less invasive ways to connect with these animals. Seriously, you could try these incredible virtual reality experiences that get you closer than any cage ever could. You could look for eco-friendly snorkeling or diving tours that find sharks naturally without using any bait. Or you could even get your hands dirty and join a shark conservation volunteer program. And that leaves us with this one last really big question. And it's bigger than just sharks in cages. In our very human desire to connect with the natural world, how do we decide when our presence is actually helping and when it's doing harm? Where exactly do we draw the line?